I'm here with is it Brandon Slagle?
Yes, yes, it is.
I am here with Brandon Slagle, the director of The Flood, what I might call Assault on Precinct 13 with alligators, which is a pretty fun movie. Um,
Yeah.
I guess I'm looking at your IMDb, and I guess I'll start off with how do you have time for this interview? Because you should be cranking out like 3 or 4 movies within this 15 minutes.
I have terrible back pain. My hair is rapidly turning white. So yeah, I don't have to, but I do it anyway because you have to.
Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't jealous because you got the Takashi Miike numbers. I would love to just be making movies like left and right. Um, so not well with Takashi Miike, he's got like 100 film credits, but only 4 writing credits, and you got just as many writing credits as you do directing credits, but you don't direct all the movies you write, and you don't write all the movies you direct. What goes into the thought process of I'm going to direct this script. I'm not going to direct the script that I wrote, so on and so forth.
So this is actually kind of a newer thing because originally, so I actually, I didn't go to film school, but I did go to writing school, if you can call it that. I went to a specialized course in New York City. So it's always something that, if you don't get what you want for people, or like when I was starting out, if you can't pay a screenwriter, you got to do it yourself. So, um, and even beyond just, taking classes from it, I'd say, um, anyone who's 40 and above and was a fan of Terminator 2 may remember that they published the screenplay for it that had a bunch of storyboards. So that kind of helped me understand structure and things like that, and then the course helped me understand execution. So it was really out of necessity for a long time, and me being just kind of a writer for hire is a recent thing, and it's actually because the guy standing behind you, Lewis, was hired to direct a movie, and he asked very earnestly if I could write it. And actually, that's what he did: is he held me at gunpoint and put up his hand like this. Um, and the powers that be seemed to like it, so I was hired to do a few more things. And there's actually a couple of things that are not on IMDb or anything that you should hear more about soon. That I'm just a writer, just a writer as in whatever.
Yeah, and also you started off in music.
Yes,
I believe the band's Dissection,
yes.
industrial band. I heard a couple songs on there, and they're. I'm a metal guy, so I really dug those. What's kind of some of the uh, aspects of music that you bring with you when making movies?
I think it's partially the way that I'm able to address crowds. Like there's some directors that are a little more withdrawn. I don't want to say meek, but just quieter. And I'm able to stand up in front of 200 people and talk to them like it's a one-on-one. And also, just because I met a lot of different types of people from different places. So I feel like because of that, I'm able to integrate into and be accepting of different cultures, different um, people from just different countries easier than I would have been otherwise. And also, I feel like those songs back in the day would be the soundtrack to a lot of these movies now.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little distracted by your Mortal Kombat machine in the background.
You're not the first one. My wife told me to move it, but it's a great talking piece.
Oh, it is. So, any plans on doing a Mortal Kombat movie, or a Mortal Kombat adjacent movie in the future?
I would love that, and I would actually cast Scott Adkins in it so that the
Oh,
internet.
yes.
I know people are pulling for him to be Johnny Cage. Love Carl Urban, but man, one day.
Yeah. So who's Louis Mandylor playing in this Mortal Kombat, this fictional Mortal Kombat movie?
Probably Striker.
Oh, nailed it, nailed it.
or uh or Cabal.
So
Um
what's your I guess what's your mention you do a lot of writing and a lot of directing. Like what's kind of your work process as far as like because it takes people a long time to write scripts and you got a bunch of them. So I imagine you have to have your work days planned pretty well.
So I have a 2-year-old, so a lot of the writing has to be done at night after she's asleep. But really, I found it really works for me is, and maybe this doesn't work for everyone, but I think it's worth trying, is you just have to sit there and you have to write something. You have to get it out. You have to finish your script because the worst that can happen is you go back and revise it. So as long as you have a great foundation or a starting point, and those really don't take that long to write. You don't have to spend years on the script just to get a first draft. You can always go back and fix your work. So I always focus on getting that first draft done. And it takes me generally, if I, and these stories are basically pretty simple, but I try to put interesting characters in them. If you can get that first draft out, then you're set. And you can put in notes from the producers, from actors, from yourself, from whoever. But as long as you have a draft, then you're doing work.
Does something going different, like if you're writing one that you're directing versus if you're writing a script that someone else is directing, for example?
So there's a script that Lewis actually directed called Operation Blood Hunt. It's kind of like Hellboy meets Blade 2.
Sweet.
And so there's a couple of kills that I saved for myself for other movies, but otherwise, no. I mean, I don't hold back. And so if something works in the story, it works.
Yeah. And also, how do you come up with the money? Because movies are not cheap to make. And
so, the past few years, I've been mostly hired to do these, which is a blessing. And I worked for many, many, many years to be able to do that. But before that, for years, my producing partner, Devaney, who I'm also married to, and I had to find investment on our own. And we went through a few different partners and so on. But really, we started from the ground up. I think a lot of people call that, grabbing it by the bootstraps and going or whatever. But this is the result of a lot of hustling and meeting people and movies, hopefully having gotten better over the years. So now rather than having to go find money, I'm very blessed now that I'm hired to do these.
all right. Sorry, we got a storm going on in the background.
Oh, well, is it Raiden?
Yeah. Raiden's angry at me. He's like, I want to talk to Louis Mandylor. I'm like,
but you have an storm in addition to the storm and Raiden on. Wow, that's a lot.
So you seem to dig genre a lot, which I guess kind of goes hand in hand with metal, because I've been in metal bands in the past, and not everyone loves it, but also I think that kind of that I don't know what you would call it, but just people not loving what I do. But then I also fall into other like horror and action and stuff that not everyone takes seriously, but I love it. Do you have any of that kind of feeling towards your work, and how much that came from metal or not?
Yeah. So my on my dad's side, my cousin Jesse, a couple of years older than me, actually grew up to run kind of like a mini Shout Factory label called Diabolic DVD. Who they do a lot of like reissues and remastering of like Giallo films and European horror and things that are hard to find. So basically, when he and I were little kids, he would get a hold of like 70s, 80s issues of Fangoria or the old Gore Zone. And we'd read through them in the back seat and have to explain to our grandmother on the way to church why we were reading these and why they were okay. So I really grew up with all this stuff. Like I grew up with 70s and 80s horror, with slashers and Friday the 13th. And my dad knew all the guys that did Chainsaw Massacre because he dealt in drugs. That's a true story, by the way.
Oh.
And at the same time, I was into martial arts and Bruce Lee and John Woo's early movies and stuff. So I really grew up with this love of both of them, where I think I kind of, to me, like one kind of benefits the other, because there's certain aspects of horror that work in an action movie and vice versa. But it's just what I like.
Yeah. Can we go back to that drug story?
My dad sold weed to most of the crew of Texas Chainsaw Massacre in Austin in 1972 or 73. But yeah, a lot of those guys, Lou Perryman, who Unfortunately, he's passed away. He played the Stretch's producer in Chainsaw Massacre 2 and was assistant camera. That was a friend of my dad's. He was the guy that was his truck driver at the end of the first movie. He was also passed away. He was a friend of his, and they all ran in the same circles. So Austin was an interesting place in the 70s.
Fun. What's kind of some of your favorite unsung just genre movies in general, whether they be action or horror or comedy?
I really think so. On the action side, I feel like a lot of younger filmmakers now, like they don't know who John Woo is. They don't know who Jackie Chan or Bruce Lee are. And it sounds strange to say, but they really don't. And that's really just because, as time goes on, history kind of fades things away. So I think, find a copy of like Hard Boiled or even A Better Tomorrow or Bullet in the Head. And that's like a film school, basically. It's like a beat by beat how to shoot a coherent, exciting action scene. Movies, horror. There's things like I used to love the Concord Roger Corman Watchers with Corey Haim. And it's a terrible adaptation of the book, which is one of my favorite novels, but it's just a fun movie that I probably watched 500 times. There's so many things. I used to have kind of like a free pass at the mom and pop video stores when I was a teenager, and so I'd rent literally everything. So this could be an entire different show just to talk about things where you walk in, there's a big clamshell case and like someone eviscerated on the cover. And that was just how it was then. And man, this is a long, it's a long winding road to talk about these things. But there's so many movies from that era that, every now and then they'll get like a re-release from Shout or from my cousin's label, but oh my God. How much time do we have? if we had 2 hours, this would be a show of its own.
Yeah. We had back when I lived in Omaha, we had a group of people, we get together, we call it Splatter House. And the people that lived there just grabbed like random horror movies and would watch them. I remember one time they grabbed, I don't know if you heard of the August Underground movies, but they played those and we're watching it, and about like I'd say 15, 20 minutes through the movie, we just go out for a smoke and go, are we watching a snuff film?
Yep. It's, I don't know, there used to be kind of, and maybe this is just, being old talking, there was kind of like this mystique about those kind of movies, like in the 80s and 90s, because for one, there wasn't VOD, there wasn't piracy, there wasn't anything about that. So these movies were like legendary. Like the original Faces of Death, terrible movie, I'm going to say it. And 80% of it's fake, but it had this aura about it, like, oh, the holy grail of horror movies. They were just this fun and thrill of finding these things back in the day when you couldn't just, type it in your search engine and watch it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, the band movie that you're not allowed, they won't let you see. Oh, I want to see it. I want to see it all.
Yeah, that was an endorsement. It's like when the parental advisory sticker came out in 1990. That was an endorsement.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
Also, with like all your credits that you have, the directing, camera work, editing, like all that, like what's kind of some of your favorite behind the scenes stuff that you do, beyond directing and writing?
So kind of like with writing originally, a lot of the post-production stuff I did out of necessity, just because there wasn't really money to. But even beyond that, I wanted to understand every part of movie making. There's a lot of credits that aren't on there that I don't have credit on for doing post on movies, because I did that kind of as a side hustle for like a decade. I really actually liked the sound design and color grading. One thing that was a little less stressful, but it's also where you start to see a lot of the movie come alive, and things that maybe didn't work before suddenly work now, and they click and they feel right because the right sound was put on it, or a certain, mood is evoked by the color scheme, things like that.
Yeah. Color grading is actually a weird one, because I've never heard anyone say that. Like, what Um, is it a lot of it like tedious, but you kind of get locked in the zone, or what is it about doing stuff like that that you find satisfying specifically?
So like it's a bit of the zone thing of like accomplishment, and you like I said, you see something coming alive, or you see it, like almost in its final state, and you get that endorphin kick. You're like, yeah, yeah, this is getting somewhere. Sound especially does that too, where you feel it more as an experience. Like it becomes tangible because it exists in its own world now because sounds happen. It sounds really kind of simple to say, but hey, if you look at something that has no sound on it and just sounds of the crew in the background and noise versus something that's mixed and has the entire environment of it, it's night and day. And it's probably actually, a lot of people say this, it's more important than really it looking pretty.
Yeah. Do you also like when you finish your movies, do you just like watching them 3, 4 times, 5, 10, 12 times? Just like, I did this. This is so cool. I love this.
I do that with fight scenes, especially like I have this like certain style I like to shoot things. In the past few movies, I've really been able to work with directors of photography and stunt people who get it, who also have that same goal. Um, so first off, anyone who says they don't watch their movies is lying to you, and that goes for actors too. Um, but I'll usually, what I'll do is once something's done, it's complete, it's delivered, I'll take a few weeks, couple of months, not watch it at all, and then go back and look at it. And then I can watch it, just as a fan, as a viewer, and hopefully I like it. And that's when I know that, that we did right. Like, especially with a movie like this, that's supposed to be entertainment and not have a deep meaning. Like I put on The Flood about 2 weeks ago after having not watched it at all for months. And I'm like, hey, I'm having a good time here. And it was fresh and new. And I guess I forgot like a lot of the story elements too, because I was there, like eating popcorn, watching it, like, oh, what's going to happen next?
I also to bounce off that. So The Flood looks like it's available in theaters, on demand, and digital on July 14th.
Yes.
And just kind of go back to watching your work. Does it ever get old watching your movie in theaters? Because I figure like the first time was like special, and then I don't know this, but I imagine you'd be chasing that high, and maybe you never get it again, or maybe it's just as
So,
exciting every time.
as far as like a movie I've made, the first one that I saw, I've seen a bunch of them, like if they were at film festivals or whatever. But there's a movie we did a few years ago called, and this is one we raised money for, called The Dawn, and it's more of a somber, like slow burn horror film. It was picked up by a company called Vertical Entertainment, who partnered with Lionsgate on it, and it was my first directorial movie that had a theatrical release. And that's not necessarily the kind of movie I would go to see in the theater, but going to see it, it was, and going to see it, it was interesting because there were other people there that hadn't seen it, and so it's interesting just to look over and something you worked really hard on and you were crossing your fingers worked, and it works, or it plays well, or it feels cinematic, or it just feels like it belongs. Unfortunately, that movie came out right before COVID.
Like,
Um, so my movie after that, Attack of the Unknown, had a theatrical release, but it was kind of in name only, just because no one could really go to these theaters. And then Battle for Saipan had one, and I couldn't go. And now The Flood is having one, and I'll probably be overseas shooting another movie. So,
like,
so I still have that. Like, it hasn't. Hopefully, because of that, because I don't get to go see these that often. Hopefully, the next time I finally get to see one of these in the theater, it'll still have that like specialness about it.
all right. Well, Brandon, thanks for joining me today. I just want to leave everyone on one last thing. You have such an extensive filmography. Other than The Flood, which hopefully everyone goes and watches on July 14th. What's one of your movies that you've done in the past where you're particularly proud of? It's like, I wish everyone would just watch. Like, if they could watch one, I wish
Yeah.
they would watch this one because it is so good. I'm so proud of it.
So going back, I'm one of the first ones to admit, like, if I screwed up in something, or a movie has flaws, or it doesn't quite do what we wanted it to. And every movie's a learning process. And the past few, I actually kind of like. Um, there's one, I was lucky enough to do a bunch of movies back to back. And so there's one that came out a couple of months ago called Breakout that Lewis is also in. It was actually the first movie that Tom Sizemore was in that was released after his death. And it's sort of a Die Hard in a prison type movie where Lewis's character is estranged from his son, played by Christoph Sanders from The Bay. It's a soap opera, and goes to see him in prison. And while that happens, Die Hard breaks out. Brian Krause, who is a heartthrob in Charmed, plays a fantastic villain. He loved doing it too because it was so opposite of what he normally gets to do. And just the movie's something that has a lot of heart and grit to it and relatable characters. And I feel like it hasn't quite reached its audience. So if you can, check out Breakout. Came out a couple of months ago on VOD. It's not on DVD yet, but hopefully people discover it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Brandon, and good luck with the movie. And can't wait to see what else you got coming up.
All right, thank you very much.